I'd like to welcome everyone to the Awakening Health Show. And this is a very special opportunity that I have today, which is to speak to some wonderful people who have shown their interest in making a difference in their own lives and in the world. The two groups, Sachi, are called Texas Nexus.
One is the Texas Nexus and the other one is the Know Your Rights. And right now, everybody that's here is from Know Your Rights. Although we're all in the Texas Nexus, like we have weekly classes for Know Your Rights, so yeah.
Great. And could you tell us just for a moment what what it is that makes Texas Nexus and Know Your Rights, what are they about?
So Know Your Rights is about us studying our rights. We started in March because of the whole craziness that's going on in the world right now. We wanted to learn. We started studying in March and started with our basic rights, and we just wanted to learn all the law. We learn about laws, we learn about all sorts of things, about the sheriff, law enforcement, our land, and it's been pretty consistent. And we've built a pretty, I love our friends that come to this class. It's really special. And then the Texas Nexus is about getting all the groups, there are separate groups in Texas, and bringing them all together in one place.
And separate groups that are involved with, or with what?
With freedom.
With freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
And we want to unite everyone, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I would imagine for this group, we would be talking about freedom to choose our way of receiving medicine, or taking care of ourselves, or making choices about our personal health. And then, knowing our rights would be what our rights are about along those lines.
Which we have them.
Yes.
We do have them.
Yes, we do.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, maybe at some point we could do it, you and I can do an interview session about that.
Yeah, totally.
So that our listeners could hear about the whole idea of what our actual rights are.
Absolutely.
In Texas regarding health.
Yeah, I'd love to help educate people. That'd be great.
It's so important.
Yeah, it really is. It starts with education.
Yes. Yeah, it really does. And just so you know, I have a background as a Waldorf teacher many years ago.
Oh, that's nice.
And the word education is such an important word for us. I love personally etymological dictionaries. They can educate us so deeply about the depth of meaning of things. Now, you might want to check it out. Words that touch you or catch you, if you take a look, you'll see where they derived from. It's oftentimes fascinating. But the one part that I remember about education is it comes from educare, which means to draw the wisdom from within and bring it to your awareness.
That's great.
Yeah, so it's not about having information dumped on you. It's about your connection with these ideas. And so it kind of, has an internal kind of a connection which has us really get in touch with what is true for us. And that's a very big part of what I work with my patients about, is really tuning into what our body and our hearts have to say about things. Because there's so much information out there and everything you can find a contradiction for. And there's also a premise I'd like you to consider, and that is that each one of us is unique and different. And what is beneficial for one person may not necessarily be beneficial for another. So I'm going to share a whole wide variety of things with you. And I'm going to offer that we do this, or invite you to, the talks I'll be doing over time. I'm hoping to do at least 1 month, maybe more if people are interested, where we can really start learning skills to find out our own answers from the wisdom that exists inside of us. So deepening our connection with our own internal knowing, drawing that knowing that's intrinsic to being human into our awareness, that most of us plain do not put our focus on and therefore do not realize we have. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
So if that's of interest to you, it's one of my passions these days. So thank you for bringing up education.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's
a big part of my life.
Me too. I mean, as being a Waldorf teacher many years ago, and education is really what we do with this process. It's what it's all about. It's one of the ways we can support each other is to honor the wisdom that comes from within you and each other and myself. And then to do some deep internal questioning about what's really, that word really, true for you. I want to start by just saying that if we were to draw a pyramid and put at the top of the pyramid our divine or spiritual energy, and then underneath the tip of that pyramid, the next layer down would be our mental energy. And beneath that would be our emotional energy. And beneath that would be our physicality, our biochemistry, our what we can physically do, take, all of that. Okay, if we start at the top, the spiritual energy can cure anything. If you have a true, full connection and knowing of who you are as an energetic being that is not limited to this body. And you're going to find that in the ancient wisdom of almost every tradition. These days, personally, I have been finding profound support by the work of Sadhguru. He literally has thousands of YouTubes, and you can put in his name and anything you're interested in and get his hit on things. He's very much a person of the world. He's personally been responsible for hundreds of millions of trees being planted in India, for turning around the situation with the rivers, for helping to rebuild the health of the soil so that farmers can actually farm again. We've got thousands and thousands of people that are committing suicide, farmers, because they can't grow and they can't stand to see their families and themselves starve to death because of what's happened to the water and the soil and everything else. And it's widespread what we're doing to the earth. So unlike most gurus, he's very much an activist. Politically, education-wise, he's been asked to speak for physicists from Harvard as a primary speaker for them, for MIT, because the ancient wisdom from India includes quantum mechanics. Way, way back, thousands of years ago. So some of the things I'm going to share with you are ancient, and they have profound effect on our immune systems. They come from recommendations from Sadhguru. And he's relatively new in my world. I've been meditating and doing spiritual work since I was 14 years old, and I'm not far from 70. So it's been a whole life process for me. And right now, I'm just so excited about the way he's bringing it into the world. And I've found that I'm learning so much at a whole new level from what he has to offer to us. So I encourage you to check him out. He has a free app. And one of the things he has on his app is a breathing exercise that has to do with immunity. and I found it to be profound. He recommends it for all first responders and doctors and people in hospitals and all the rest of it. Not just for COVID, but to help with the whole realm of our lungs and breathing. And that affects everything. Because if we're to really look at immunity from the primary aspects of what we need to be healthy, the first one for the physical body is oxygen. We can't exist for minutes without oxygen. And then we can't exist, for most of us, for more than a number of days without water. So these are in levels of importance: oxygen first, water second. Food, it's questionable which comes third. I think sleep comes third. Because if you don't sleep for 4 or 5 days, you're going to pretty much be gone. It's one of the things that's been used to torture people, is to prevent them from sleeping, so that they go out of their minds and lose connection with their humanity. And then the fourth is food, because people can fast for a very long time. I used to do 21-day water fasts at the change of the seasons when I was a lot younger. And I found it to be really, really beneficial. But at this stage of the game, I can't do 21 days. In fact, 2 days is hard for me. But in those days, it was really easy for me to do 21 days, just water.
When you say this stage of the game, are you talking about because of the level of toxins and pollutions and all that, or are you talking more just your older?
I think it has to do with my age, but also a number of the challenges that I've been through. Mm-hmm. Which, at some point, if you like, I can tell you more about my personal history, because it's been kind of an unusual one in my physical process.
So you weren't talking about the physical area around you then, when you said that?
No.
Okay.
No. Because I'm going to share with you that we actually can do a tremendous amount to upregulate our body's ability to clear toxins out of ourselves. And that is actually one of the primary things that I do with people that choose to be my patients. It's an extremely extensive process. For most of us, it takes about a year to a year and a half to rebuild the strength of both our different aspects of the body that are involved with, first of all, drainage, and then detoxification. So I'd like to make differentiation between the two and explain them to you. And just know that now we're at the bottom rung of the pyramid. We're in the physical realm. So drainage has to do with our ability to drain out toxins. So perhaps if you wouldn't mind being seen on screen, you might want to hold this up for me, or I can do my best to hold this up for you. And this is a little chart of the drainage system. And if this was a sink up
Do you
here.
want to hold it? I'll hold it. I don't mind being on camera.
All right, here we go. Thanks, honey. Okay, so if we had a sink up here that was filled and wasn't able to drain, drainage comes from, if we were to just keep adding more and more to that sink, we would just have an overflow. So imagine that this sink is filled with the toxins of our environment. The toxins in our air, some people believe very strongly, I think it's quite true, that it's very likely that we have issues with chemtrails. So in the air, we have lots of different chemicals that are in the air, from what we're putting into the soil, from what's being emitted from our cars, from our houses, from all kinds of things. Then we also have toxins from the foods that we're eating. For those who are not considering the importance of having real food and organic food, We have so much glyphosate now in our food, which is an incredible deterrent to our body's ability to produce energy through our mitochondria. And we'll be talking about mitochondria as part of the bigger picture at some point here. I mean, there's so many toxins on every level. In this room right now, even though I have thousands of dollars of things in this house to help deal with the frequencies of EMFs and something called BioGeometry, which we'll talk about at some point, that has the capacity to transmute harmful energies and make them healthy, not just deteriorate them, the harmful ones, but actually create a healing environment. Still, there's so much because we have fire retardants. These couches were basically made with materials that are not supposed to be toxic to anyone. But almost everything that we get has to have fire retardants by law. And formaldehydes in our building materials. And even when we call something green building materials, they're primarily just, what do they call it? They're reused, they're taken, they're different materials that were toxic that were broken down and reused again.
I call them recycled toxins.
There we go, recycled toxins. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, you know, all of that is part of what our drainage system has to deal with. And where does the drainage stuff have to take place? If we don't clear the pipe in the sink, we're not going to be able to get the sink to drain, right? Well, that begins for us as humans with our colon. And if we're constipated, if we're not having 2 to 3 good bowel movements a day, that's one of the primary, in fact, that's the foundation of the drainage system. If we don't have that, then we can't safely remove toxins from the body because we're just going to re-pollute ourselves. Everything will be back in the bloodstream again. And typically, if it's in the bloodstream, it's going to go to the weakest parts and hurt us even more. So, I'm going to quickly mention this, but at some point we'll go back into this in depth, maybe not today. But the idea that you get tested for heavy metals, for instance, and we see that you have heavy metals. If we go in and start at the top with the issue of heavy metals and try to detox you from heavy metals and your drain isn't opened, what do you think is going to happen to you? You're going to get really sick. And almost all of the original products that we had, this was only like 5 years ago, to deal with drainage in the past, drain through the kidney. But the kidney is so delicate compared to the bowel. So when we used products that were called binders, we were binding stuff through the kidney and it was really hard. People got really sick in the binding process. And now we have binders that move through the bowel, and we can deeply benefit people in binding challenging things and actually support people with those binders to have the nutrients that we need to upregulate tissues and organs rather than just hurt them. So the first level is the colon. And then we move to the kidney, and the lymphatic system is up here, but the kidney, the lungs, and the skin. What happens to many people when they are having bowel issues and they're really constipated? We'll see it show up in the skin with blemishes, with rashes, with itching, all of that sort of thing. And so one of the things I encourage people, if they can afford to do it, is there's wonderful, simple, inexpensive, relatively, saunas that we can get our hands on. And doing sauna work when we're working with infrared, in particular, can be profound in supporting the movement of toxins out through the skin. But so can intense physical activity where we really get ourselves to the point of sweating. So if we can't get our hands on that, or I can even show you how you can make your own simple saunas, it's going to be just near infrared rather than all the different aspects of far and near. But you can actually make your own saunas with a board of wood and putting together these little holders for light bulbs and making yourself your own sauna.
That's cool.
It's cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah.
Tell us, please.
Actually, Bernard has one that a friend of ours made. So, but I actually have the one that's set up for us where it's made out of fabric. Your head is out of it. And in that way, you're not re-intoxicating yourself. You're not breathing in the toxins that you're releasing through your skin. When my patients are going through chemo and things like that, if they insist on doing that, because I mean, I personally went through colon cancer and treated myself completely naturally and did no chemo, no radiation or anything. So it's optional, you know, how you treat yourself. But the skin with using a towel when you're in the sauna will oftentimes have many different colors on it from the stuff that's being released from your skin in the sauna, the toxins that are coming out of the skin. So, I mean, it's a very profound way to detox. It's the largest organ of detoxification in the body. So we haven't gotten to detoxification yet, but there is a level of drainage in the skin as well. And then we move up to the lymphatic system, and we have lymph vessels throughout the entire body. And recent education, we didn't know this up until about 5 years ago. I used to do manual lymph drainage with my patients who had lymphedema after cancer therapies where they removed people's lymph nodes. A woman's arm could be as big as her thigh from the swelling, and hard and painful. Men's testicles could be as big as cantaloupes. I mean, it was just unreal when they had testicular cancer and things like that, or colon cancer, from the removal of lymph nodes in that particular area. It could happen with thighs too for women when they had ovarian cancers and things like that, uterine cancers, and they removed a bunch of lymph nodes. So it's possible just with massage, and one of the things that's on some of my YouTubes is showing you how to do your own lymphatic massage to support yourself in protecting your lymphatic system, which is one of the fluid parts of our body that's involved with our detoxification. So that's the lymphatic level. And then when we move up to organs and tissues, this is where our organs and tissues can get filled with the toxins if these haven't been taken care of. And then it goes all the way to the cellular level. And that's when we start destroying cells because we don't have the ability to get the nutrients that we need into the cells. So we need to make sure that we're draining. And so we want to talk for the most basic of levels. First of all, making sure that you're pooping. Making sure that you have enough good quality, clean water, that your kidneys are working, that your bladder's working, that you have the fluid that you need so that your lymphatic system has enough fluid to do what it needs to do, and supporting circulation. My last YouTube that we did was going into great depth about using niacin to support circulation, flushing niacin, not niacinamide, and sweating and exercise to move extreme toxins out of the body. And this is a therapy that had been very effectively used actually in addictions when people had serious addictions to things like heroin, and helping to move the toxicity from that and the different emotional aspects out of the body so that people no longer were addicted. And most of us, whether we want to cop to it or not, have some form of addiction. It could be addiction to sugar, it could be addiction to bread, it could be addiction to love. It could be addiction to being in control. You know, there's some, most of us do have something that we're kind of obsessed about in one way or another. And so it's a really good thing to work on a deeper level with how this can move itself into different parts of the physicality. Okay? So thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
helping with that. All right. So we've just back here. Well, we've just taken a little look here, kind of a big overview look at how huge this topic can be. This whole idea of our immunity and what we can do about it. So we've started at looking at the whole area of drainage. But then we need to look at detox. And detox is generally involved with, after we've got those organs of drainage open, then we can look at things like parasites. And most of us don't want to consider the possibility that we have parasites. But the truth of the matter is we're breathing them in every time we breathe. And we're also, we have them all over our body. We have them, thousands of them, teeny tiny microscopic ones, on our eyes, in our eyes. And we have a symbiotic relationship with them. So, symbiotic means that we are benefiting and being benefited. So there's a relationship where there's a give and take between the parasites and us. Most people don't realize that parasites are only able to be where they find food. And most of them eat that which we really don't want. They eat toxins. They eat poisons. They eat the byproducts of our lack of safety. So another huge area of discussion is our autonomic nervous system and what's now being called the polyvagal system. Have you all heard of that term before? Okay, so polyvagal is an arena that's really come to the medical forefront about 25 years ago by a professor, neurologist, Dr. Stephen Porges, and I have YouTubes on this. I'll give you a quick little synopsis of it, but the bottom line is our autonomic nervous system is beneath the level of our consciousness, and its purpose is to keep us alive. And it's very attuned to fear and safety. So let me give you a demonstrable thing that you can begin to consider. This is only one tiny little piece of the autonomic nervous system, but we can use it as a metaphor to understand much more deeply the whole arena of the autonomic nervous system. But when we go into a really dark room, our pupils get really huge. They open so that they can let in more light. In that process, they're also softening as they open. If we go from this dark room into a place where the light is really bright, our pupils will immediately get teeny tiny because it's challenging. It hurts a little bit, doesn't it? Where our pupils are contracting. They're getting tight. In order for nutrients to get into our cells, if we're tight like this, we're not going to be able to let it in. But if we're soft, the nutrients can get in. Every organ, every tissue has a story, an emotional story. This is a book of some amazing work called Recall Healing, and its foundation is German New Medicine, which I did a really deep study of, and I'm always interested in going deeper with this. And literally, there is a communication with every disease, every organ, every part of our body that is trying to get through to us. And this is a mapping over many years of the emotions. I used to have a whole case of these books. They're gone now. They're quite expensive. They're like $100. But in this book is also a basic course on how to use it. And I did 6 primary classes. Each class was like $300 to $400 plus traveling and staying somewhere for 3 to 5 days to learn this material in depth. But it's amazing the connection as far as our emotions go and each one of these tissues. And typically what we're doing is contracting around something, an emotional issue, and it has its home in different parts of our body depending upon what the emotion is. Like for instance, digestive issues generally have to do with there's something in the world that we just don't feel like we can digest. We can't digest what's going on politically. We can't digest what's going on with our freedom. We can't digest something. So if we can find a way to really experience, and here we go back to Sadhguru, that we're not this body, that we're not this mind, that we can do things to make it easier for this body and mind, and it's a very wholly important thing to do. But if we can do it from the place of realizing that we are much greater than that, then we can do it in a way where we're not going into fear, hatred, anger, or whatever. We can do it from a place that actually unites us and provides an expansive relationship with each other and with the world so that transformation can take place. Because when we isolate and polarize, it's pretty hard for anything to happen but fighting and wars. A war that we might have with ourselves about things, or a war that we have with others. But that's not a very creative process. People get hurt in war. Really, really hurt. And if it's true what we've learned in quantum mechanics, if anybody hurts, there's a degree I may not be conscious of, but there's a degree that I'm also being hurt, because we're all one. So what can we do to be more inclusive? What can we do to include ourselves, our families, our friends, our community, and eventually the whole world in what we experience as ourself and our family, so that we can create an experience of safety. That safety is what our autonomic nervous systems want more than anything. And in the polyvagal system, we've learned that the front part of the polyvagal system, the electrical part of us, this is a nervous system part of us, has to do, should have one of Dr. Porges' books here, but that part of us has to do with how we can stay soft or return to softness from places of contraction, because we've been trained to contract from a very early age. And there's nothing bad about contraction. I'm not making a value judgment about it. It's just the way our body protects ourselves around danger. One of the ways. And you've probably heard of the fight or flight process. That's a sympathetic type of a reaction. And the vagal system is about the parasympathetic reactions. And there's two sides to that. One is dorsal and the other is ventral. Ventral is frontal, dorsal is in the back. And in the frontal part, what happens is it allows for an expansive access to both the left and right hemispheres of the brain. The parts of the brain that are capable of direct focus and being one-pointed, and the part of the brain that's very expansive and able to get the big picture at the same time. You can see how that could be beneficial, can't you? If we can have both access to those. And at the same time, we can return to softness so that all of our systems in our body can circulate and move and get nourishment in and out of our cells, toxins in and out of our cells. When there's contraction, it gets very difficult to get things in and out of our cells. And one of the pieces of equipment that I have here is a European piece of equipment, and its job is through temperature changes to register the autonomic nervous system. So we talked about how the autonomic nervous system is beneath our level of consciousness, right? And it's all about preserving life. And it's all about how do we return to safety. Well, one of the ways that our autonomic nervous system preserves life for us is, and ancient as well, has to do with temperature. And when we're really cold, the body needs to get warmth to the organs to make sure that they stay alive. And so the heat from the outside of the body will move to the inner organs to protect us. And our ability to take the heat from the outside and bring it into the organs can give us a really good picture of how functional the autonomic nervous system is to support our health. And so there's a German device that's been used for over 30 years in originally clinics, cancer clinics in Europe, alternative medicine cancer clinics, to see how well treatments were moving for people, but also to see not only if someone has an area where there's no energy flow, where there's no change in temperature when you're exposed to cold. That's how we tell that. To when there's actually functioning happening again. And we can see the relationship of different organs. So if someone had a type of cancer, we could see what organs that we know are involved with that relationship in order to support that organ, if they're functioning well or not. Like, for instance, most people don't know that with the teeth, that every tooth has a meridian, but also organs and joints and muscles that are associated with it.
With the teeth?
With each tooth. It's kind of like a circuit breaker. Look at where it is. I mean, it's so close to the brain. The nerves go straight up into the brain. So it's like a circuit breaker in there. And I have never met a woman yet that has breast cancer who didn't have a problem with one of her second molars. The second molars are the tooth that has to do with the breast.
Oh, wow.
And almost always there was either mercury in one of those teeth from, a supposed silver, filling, or there was a root canal, or there was a tooth that was removed where the dentist didn't know about, which is true with most dentists here in the United States, they didn't know about the importance of removing the periodontal ligament. And when that stays in the jaw, then it ends up deteriorating in there, creating gangrenous tissue, which is constantly going into that circuit breaker and into the brain and into the body, basically creating an ongoing infection for the rest of your life. Minuscule, but in a profound place of important connection, and we don't feel it because there's no nerves there. So we don't even realize it's happening. So it's an insidious thing that's going on. I have YouTubes about this too. In fact, I interviewed one of my favorite dentists, who's people come to see from all over the world in Marble Falls, Dr. Stuart Nunnally. So anyway, that brings us back to the autonomic nervous system in this test that I'm talking about called regulation thermometry, and I have it here. We literally can test every tooth. It's not as effective as doing one of the three-dimensional x-rays where he can see everything on the tooth, because we're not putting this device directly on the tooth, we're putting it on the skin, and we can't be exact by doing that, but we can get a darn good idea of where the challenges are, and in relationship to actually looking at acupuncture points on the body and the temperature changes and zones of different temperature that have to do with different organs that have stood the test of time with this work in Europe. Literally hundreds of thousands of tests have been recorded, and the research, like every time I work with a patient, we'll take down information about their symptoms so that we can add it to the pool of information so that we have a deeper understanding of the changes that are happening in us as humans as we are being exposed to more and more toxins, and the diseases in relationship to these zones of temperature change. It's really amazing testing. I like to think of it as biothermal testing, and it's really known for checking out breast cancer, but it's just as effective for checking out prostate cancer for the men. But it also is looking at the possibility of cancers throughout the entire body. It's not like a diagnostic tool. It's a tool that helps us to look at what could be contributing to these problems. So we still, can benefit greatly by allopathic types of testing, but this testing will help us to get a bigger picture of what's contributing to the problem. And we have 12 factors that we're pretty sure contribute profoundly to breast cancer. Like the stomach meridian runs right to the breast. Stomach meridian issues can affect profoundly that whole arena of breast cancer. Thyroid. There's just so much. Definitely, there's huge emotional issues having to do with nurturing either a baby or a loved one, even a business. We have, typically the left side is more for a baby or a family member, and the right side is going to be more for business or friends or something else where our nurturing was not accepted, our nurturing was not wanted, where we're being pushed away.
Do the emotional issues run through the meridians?
It's not that they run through the meridians, but I think they affect the meridians. Mm-hmm. But I'm not a true expert, this is just my thought about it, mm-hmm. But we certainly see a change in these temperature patterns when these emotions exist mm-hmm. in a certain area. And there's like a biosignature. One of my primary areas where people might even say that they've experienced magic with Meridian is with homeopathy, which is frequency medicine. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what homeopathy is based on, and we can't get into that today in great depth, but a great part of what that is based on, where we get our information about it, is what we would call a biosignature. That the substance, the original substance, the plant, the metal, whatever, has a form that looks like an organ, or looks like a part of us. And that's part of how we know that an herb has the likelihood of helping specific organ in the body, having to do with form. And biogeometry gets into that as well. Everything is so related to everything. So, you can see how we're just kind of like, we are opening this huge, gigantic world as we start to discuss all of this together today. It's really amazing where it all goes. So the autonomic nervous system, whose purpose it is to keep us alive, is going to do this on so many levels. We talked about the ventral. Now we have the dorsal. So when people are in danger, they're going to tend to either fight or flight, or they're going to shut down and play dead if they need to. So if you're in a situation where you feel like you can get away, the autonomic nervous system is going to take your energy and take it out of the digestive realm, out of the sexual realm, out of a lot of different realms, and put it into the focused, direct part of your brain. Just one-pointedness of getting the hell out of there, or beating somebody up, okay, to protect yourself. And it's going to take all the energy away from digestion and maintenance of your organs and tissues, and put it into the strength in your arms and legs so that you can run as fast as you can or beat someone up, right? And your eyesight and your sense of smell might get acute, but in one arena only, so that you can tell what's going on. And that would be what happens when we're in a sympathetic dominant state. Well, I just want, without going into great depth about this time, I just want you to think about the level of fear that's being promulgated right now around COVID, or about different viruses and different disease processes. What we're talking about as we don't even know what it really is anymore. But all we know is that mandates are happening around it to do certain forms of medical interventions that some people really question whether they're beneficial for us. I'm one of those people. And the bottom line is that kind of fear can, with a certain type of person, put us in a constant state of sympathetic dominance. And what is that going to do to us? It's going to affect our digestive system. It's going to affect the part of our brain that has to do with expansiveness, and the part of us that has to do with pleasure and enjoyment through our senses. Because when we're in that all-inclusive part of the brain, the right hemisphere of the brain, we're much more creative. We can smell, we can enjoy touch, we can feel energetically what's going on around us much more easily. We have a much more profound sense of awareness. We're not just trying to get the hell out of somewhere, right? We're not just trying to protect ourselves from other people. We're able to experience inclusiveness and connection. That's the last thing you want to experience when you're trying to get away from somebody or, protect your physical body. You're not inclusive. You're exclusive at that time. To protect yourself, right? Mm-hmm. So we're basically taking the energy away from the most important aspects of our immunity when we're in fear. It's so important to find a way through meditation, through prayer, through art, through exercise, through yoga, through qigong, through whatever way is real for you. Walking in nature, I call it nature bathing. You know, finding your way to come to a place of peace and trust and safety in yourself, so that you're not in fight or flight, so that you're in the ventral vagal. Okay? Dorsal vagal, I could probably help you to understand the best from a little discussion about something you may have seen if you've been around cats at all. If a cat catches a mouse, the first thing that happens is it'll usually urinate or defecate. We talk about being scared shitless.
You mean the mouse?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Not the cat. I was like,
Yeah,
I've
not the
seen
cat.
that.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, so the mouse will either pee or poop. And it's probably going to be diarrhea, not a regular bowel movement. Because that's one of the responses that happens to us when we're in incredible fear where we can't do anything to protect ourselves. If we can do something about it, we're probably going to be in sympathetic where we can get away. But if you're in a situation where you're being tortured and you're in chains and you've got big giant people threatening to kill you and do horrible, painful things to you, you're not going to want to be present for that. You're not going to want to feel that. And the mouse doesn't want to feel what the cat's going to do to it. It also, on an unconscious level, knows that, first of all, if it pees and poops, it's going to be not the most pleasant thing in the world for the cat to smell. And it may not be as interested in eating that mouse as it would be if it didn't do that. So it's protective that it does that. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen movies where there's a child who's up in front of the class and the teacher just, is doing something to demoralize that child and they just wet themselves. May have happened to us. I know it's happened to me. So, that's part of the fear mechanism, and it's part of the dorsal vagal mechanism where we feel like we can't fight. So people with urinary retention issues may have a degree of a dorsal way of dealing with challenges, which is kind of disassociating, or maybe not even kind of, maybe full tilt boogie disassociating. Okay? And one of the things that it also does is everything in its body slows down. Its temperature gets colder. Its heart rate gets slower. And there are certain reptilian animals that will literally stop breathing for hours. The blood pressure gets extremely low, and for all intents and purposes, it appears that they're dead. That's the idea of playing dead, as one of the options that we have to dealing with extreme stress. But it's also one of the ways that we shut down emotionally from our own awareness when things are too frightening to remember. That's what happens to many women when they're raped, or children when they're raped. They don't remember it. It takes deep hypnosis to bring it back. So it's something that is one of our protective mechanisms so that we can move forward in our lives when something horrible has happened. And that's part of what the dorsal system will do. So the furthest edge of that would be catatonia. Now typically what happens with that mouse, we'll come back to our mouse and cat awareness piece again. At a certain point, the mouse is going to come out of this dorsal state where it has no awareness, it doesn't feel anything that's happening to it. You'll oftentimes see the cat swatting at the mouse to try and wake it up, to see if it's really alive. And at a certain point, it will wake up. And if the mouse is outside, not in an area that it doesn't know where it is, the mouse is going to shoot for finding its home again. So it's going to have a strong sympathetic fight or flight impulse to flight and to get itself back to safety somehow. So after the dorsal, typically there's a sympathetic response. So can you see how this dorsal part of our autonomic nervous system is also there to help preserve life for us? But in many ways, if our way of dealing with danger is to disassociate, which is the way that many people deal with danger. It's my primary way. If I'm in really severe danger, I have gone catatonic from some things that happened to me when I was younger. So that's kind of my mode. My blood pressure is lower than most people. I typically have half as many breaths as a person typically will breathe in a minute because it's so slow. My temperature runs like 96 rather than 98.6. So, everything about me is more on the dorsal side rather than the fight or flight side. And we can see this in people that tend to have low blood pressure instead of high blood pressure. There's all these really unique things that we can begin to understand that go beyond what an allopathic doctor is going to look at. And so from that understanding, we can help to balance the autonomic nervous system. And one of the things that Dr. Porges came up with was understanding the routing of the vagus nerves. He found that deep in the inner ear, there's a musculature which can be affected profoundly by sound. And he created a system called Safe and Sound, where for 5 different sessions, you listen to different sounds that are embedded in music. And I typically have people at the same time coloring mandalas, that they have something to take their mind off of what's going on. But some people like to knit or do something that's kind of mindless, and you can do that if you want, or we could play with clay, or just do something while we're listening to these sounds. And it will help to bring us to a situation where we're able to easily come back, even if you go into dorsal, or if you go into sympathetic, into a place of ventral vagus, so that we only experience the fight or flight when we really need it, and then we're home, we're not doing it as a primary mode all day long, where we come back to that full capacity of our autonomic nervous system. And I have whole YouTubes on this too.
I was just going to ask you, when you listen to the Safe and Sound, you were saying you have them do something else to kind of, is there a way you can just listen to the sound and not have to play with the clay, or is there a reason that it's better
No,
to
for
do?
people that love to, people are really good at not getting bored.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And he's done a lovely job of putting his sounds into classical music. And right now there's 3 different ones. There's one for children that's more like Disney music, because he started out doing 25 years of research with this with autistic children. Mm-hmm. And then the psychotherapists that he was working with wanted to use his work for trauma, and they found it was amazing for PTSD and for people who had come back from war, but also, of course, people who've been experiencing some form of torture or sexual abuse.
What was his name again?
Dr. Stephen Porges, Porges. And there are YouTubes of his, and he's just a lovely person to listen to.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. He's really, really amazing. He's dedicated his life to this work. And just so you know, there's some of his YouTubes where he doesn't look very healthy. It was because he was going through cancer and chemo at the time. And then you'll see him in another state. But they're fabulous YouTubes.
So
Okay.
are you taking questions?
Yes, of
Okay,
course.
okay. So back to the tooth
Uh-huh.
that you were talking about. Is there a mapping somewhere that shows like this tooth correlates with, you were saying how they correlate with organs in our body?
Yeah, honey,
Is
I
there-
can give you a copy of it.
I'm
It's-
asking because I've had numerous tooth. I had a bike rack as a child.
You had a what?
A bike rack as a child.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
And so, how do you deal with the fact that your injury, your assault
Uh-huh.
to your teeth,
Mhm.
it's out of your control. It's something that
Right, right.
I mean, because I am
Did
hearing.
you have root canals done? Or?
I've had implants, root canal, everything, and
Okay.
I'm hearing a lot lately about the correlation between dental health and chronic illness.
It's huge.
But I can't do anything about it because I had a bike rack. You know what I mean?
Well, yes, there are actually things you can do about it. And I have 2 YouTubes right now.
And I know that of the doctor you're talking about in Marble Falls.
Yeah.
Yeah. but,
Have you been to him?
No.
He's very expensive.
Yes, that's the problem with so many of the
Yeah.
things I've been looking at. It's you're financially restricted to so many of the things that are out there.
Right. Though I think it's worth going to have an assessment done for him.
What's his name again?
Dr. Stuart Nunnally, Nunnally,
N-U-N-N?
Ally.
Okay.
Yeah, I know people have gone to him and have glowing.
Everybody does. That office is magic.
Yeah.
Stuart himself was diagnosed as someone with ALS.
Oh, I didn't really know.
And he actually did not have ALS, he had mercury poisoning. And many years ago, I was what they called the dance doctor, dental amalgam society. And there were people that were in wheelchairs because of the mercury fillings in their mouths. And they would go to see people like Dr. Nunnally, and oftentimes in the office, they would get out of their wheelchairs when the mercury came out.
Wow.
And a friend of mine spoke to Dr. Nunnally and told him, he was a doctor, and he told him that he didn't think that what he had was ALS. He thought that what he had was mercury poisoning and he should at least get it checked out. So he went to see Hal Huggins. You may have seen Hal Huggins' book. He's written many books, and he was the first person to really bring the idea of mercury toxicity into awareness in the United States, into a big way, and actually trained dentists how to deal with it. Well, basically Stuart went to him, and he was like the dance patients that I was talking about. He became well and able to move, and his ALS was gone by removing mercury from his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
So, I believe that a lot of diseases that we talk about, and maybe they're accurate as far as the symptoms, but the causation is not understood, and so we're not seeing healing taking place.
Right.
And for me, it all comes back to poisons, toxins, and frequencies that are harmful to the human body. And I'm going to show you a book that I think that each one of you owes it to yourself to read. It's called The Contagion Myth, and it's by Dr. Thomas Cowan. Dr. Cowan is the medical doctor who is part of the Weston A. Price Foundation.
Mm.
And I've had the privilege of speaking for them here in Austin from time to time. I have watched Tom's work ever since the beginning of the Weston A. Price Foundation. He has numerous books. He's an anthroposophical doctor, which means he was trained in Rudolf Steiner's work. And I was a Waldorf teacher. So a Waldorf education was also started by Rudolf Steiner.
Mm.
And I found Steiner's work when I was 14. So Steiner has been a major, major influence in what I've been doing since I was very, very young.
That's the same Cowan that has that electrical, that machine that he made that you hang on. It's not the same one.
No, C-O-W-A-N.
Yeah, it's spelled the same way. That's what I was wondering.
Oh, is it?
Mhm.
Dr. Tom Cowan.
Okay.
Yeah, Tom he's just done amazing work with understanding and showing and scientifically helping to prove a lot of Steiner's pieces of information. I was in a relationship with a medical doctor, and I didn't dare talk to him about the idea that the heart is not a pump until Tom's book came out, and he was a medical doctor, and he could speak that medical language, and also had the scientific proof of it. And so my dear friend, who's a medical doctor, actually now totally gets it, and we treat people having to do with a very different understanding about what the heart is. So anyway, there's so much that what we believe, so much of what we think is the foundation, or what we've considered as foundational to who we are as humans and the way our bodies work, which just ain't so. You know, it's just not.
Do you mind,
And this book really gets into that.
do you mind passing those two around?
Sure. And I could possibly work on getting another case of these. It takes a while,
Thank you.
and they are like $100 a piece. So if there's something that you think you might have an interest in having, we can do our best to get it for you. They're really hard to get your hands on.
A lot of the good published books these days are getting harder to get.
That's
I love
true.
books. I think it's an investment.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
It sounds like you read that book, Biosignatures. Did you read that, The Sacred Geometry one?
Oh yeah, I've taken the courses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I've got thousands of dollars worth of equipment for testing and all that stuff, and there's every door, every window, everything is, yeah. And the signatures.
Has a specific signature that actually interacts with the shapes of, the things around us, basically.
Yeah, the simple way to understand that is, like you can see a little container here of water, right? So if you were to put that in a stream of water, the water would move around it. Well, we have many levels of energy that we don't see. And those forms of energy are actually going to move around any form. And so we're looking at how different forms affect the subtle levels of our energy. And you can draw these signatures and place them on different parts of your body and see profound healing things take place by having that form affecting your organs. And Dr. Karim did a study he was part of the study on Hep C. And when this is over, I'll go grab a medallion and show you a medallion that's not for Hep C, it's for other things. But he took a little piece of metal, and I don't know whether he was using, probably in that case, copper or brass. And he made different signatures that had to do with organs that all affect what we call Hep C, and viruses and other organs that seem to have affected the liver. And there were tests done before any kind of treatment was done for different people who had been diagnosed with Hep C, titers tests to see how many viral replications there were of Hep C. And then 3 different treatments were given. One of them was the classical medical model treatment, and I'm forgetting the name right now of the medication, but it's extremely expensive, thousands of dollars per treatment. And then there was a group of doctors who are involved with alternative medicine. They're called functional medicine doctors. And they did the classic stuff, which I used to do before too, which has to do with glutathione and MSC and herbs for the liver, like milk thistle and things like that. And they did their treatment on a third of the people. So a third was allopathic, a third was the functional medicine, and the other third, they did whatever they did, they kept it up, the people who were in the third group, and all they did was wear a medallion that he made. Well, over 60% of the people ended up titer free with just the medallion.
Oh, that's awesome.
Far better numbers than what was going on with the functional medicine docs, or for sure, the least effective was the medication. That was thousands of dollars per treatment.
Oh, wow.
And the people who received the treatment with the medallion also said that numerous aspects of their health were better. The quality of life was so much better, which was not the case with the others.
Very interesting.
So, I mean, it's just, it's getting to that point that we started out with, that we are multi-dimensional people.
Yeah.
There's so much more to us than what I would call our earth suits. I'm so grateful for this earth suit, and I really feel it's my responsibility to take as good a care of it as I can, because it's going to have to do with the quality of my experience, you know, of conscious experience. So I'm willing to do whatever it takes to be as healthy as I possibly can. And that's basically what my life has been about. But there's other dimensions. And people who, you know, were born with really severe challenges to their physical bodies oftentimes have learned what it is to live in these other dimensions in order to have an incredible quality of life, and who's to say they might even have a far better quality of life than I am in my healthier than I've ever been body at this age. So, I mean, it's just amazing to recognize that we have the capacity to do all kinds of amazing things with our forms. Okay, so we've just talked about we started with polyvagal and we ended up in this mass of you know, expression of more and more things that are related. And of course, our foundation topic is immunity. So it might be a good thing at this point to talk to you a tiny bit about the realm of homeopathy, because homeopathy has been around for over 250 years now, and it has been so denigrated in this country. There is a statue in Washington, D.C. of the person who developed homeopathy, Hahnemann. Is his name, Dr. Hahnemann. And his statue is there in Washington, D.C. because he single-handedly got rid of the cholera pandemic that happened in the United States with 3 homeopathic remedies. And when I talk about homeopathic remedies, I'm talking about frequency remedies. They didn't have anything physical in them. They had information. And in a way, we just talked a little bit about biogeometry. What we're talking about with biogeometry is also the frequency of a form that that's being contributed to the body. And what we're doing with homeopathy is we're taking a frequency, putting it in water, and giving it to the body. And so the realm of water is something that we should talk about, but we'll do that after homeopathy, about how profoundly important it is. And, but these frequencies can affect other bodies that we can't physically touch, see, or really evaluate or quantify through things like electron microscopes or regular microscopes. It's at a different quality. And actually, that's one of the terminologies that's spoken a lot about by Ibrahim Karim, is quantitative and qualitative energies. So what we're looking at is a qualitative energy that's beyond the physical. And remember how we talked about the pyramid, where we've got the spirit at the top. And the higher up you go, if you work at the emotional level, you can clear the physical. If you work at the mental level, you can clear the emotional and the physical. We work at the spiritual, and we can clear them all. Homeopathic remedies have the capacity to work at all of those higher levels. So it's quite fascinating. And oftentimes we'll see that when we clear something for someone, particularly what we call the miasmic level, or the level of inherited weakness, we'll see that the children and the parents of the person who's being treated no longer have those health issues. They have been what we now would call contributed to us DNA. So there's that whole level where the DNA is being affected, if we want to talk about it on a more physical level. Please come join us. It's all right. You're welcome. This is probably the part that you needed to hear about.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi, Lauren.
Okay. So anyway, with homeopathic remedies, we can affect just about anything. And recently, I've been having so much fun because I've found a European homeopath who has been teaching about how to affect our genetic inheritances and inherited traumas from our genetic line, as well as past life stuff, if you want to look at it from that perspective. And it's the most interesting remedies, and he's breaking all the rules of homeopathy
So wait,
to work at this level.
did you just say there's homeopathic remedies for past life trauma?
Yes.
The little things in sugar that you can really?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're, we have to get them made in England and sent here because I don't know anybody else who's doing them. And we're actually creating a new remedy by combining 3.
What's the name of this doctor who's doing that? You know?
I actually just ordered like 4 of his books. I know his first name is Colin. I'm not very good at last names,
That's
but
okay.
I'll have it for you.
Yeah.
So past trauma can be many things, right? So
Yeah.
does it have to be like known specifically what the
Yeah.
trauma is in order to heal it? No, it doesn't matter.
Like for instance, I'm Jewish on both sides. Well, Holocaust is a part of my background. And so much of my personal like idiosyncrasies, uniquenesses, or however you want to call it, clearly would be beneficial to somebody who was in a concentration camp. I've been teased a lot, and my previous partner, who was a medical doctor, used to say that I was an air plant because I can literally fast and gain weight.
Oh, wow.
My metabolism is so slow that I can hold on to weight eating 1 meal a day, even gain weight. I've been doing that ever since I had an open heart surgery and had too much of a gap between the time that they connected me to life support, so I lost a lot of oxygen to the brain and lost a lot of brain function. And I've been working very hard to get it back, and part of it was a ketogenic diet and doing intermittent fasting. And I got to the point where 1 meal a day was all I needed. Those, by the way, can be profound for brain support. And so I pretty much have my brain back. I can, from time to time, have challenges with nouns in particular, names of things, names of people. So I don't recall his last name. I'm still working on that. But I mean, it used to take me probably 2 to 3 times as long to get out the words that I'm getting out now, because I'd be going to look for them in my file cabinet, and they just didn't want to come down and make themselves conscious to me. So I mean, almost everything that goes on with our bodies, we can find a way to restore, because that's what our body wants for us. That's what our autonomic nervous system is designed to do. It's to find a way to preserve us and to heal us. So there's so much. So I just want you to know, in Europe especially, but it's true in the United States as well, with this whole situation with COVID, there are so many doctors working with how do we deal with it homeopathically. And I have homeopathic remedies of all of the so-called vaccines. That's one way. I also have homeopathic remedies that were made from sputum of somebody who had really intense symptoms of COVID. And that one has had profound effects for my clients. But the other thing is, in homeopathy, we don't care what the name of a disease is or a problem. What we care about is your unique response to it. And so we look for the homeopathic remedy that deals with the way your body is responding. And we treat it. And as the symptoms change, the remedies change. And that's how we heal a body. So I've had people coming to me coughing up blood, and horribly sick and blue. And we used homeopathic remedies in combination with something that I'm going to be talking to you next, which is these very, very unique supplements based on the valences of minerals through plant-based minerals, not minerals that are made from rocks, that can easily cross the bilipid membranes of our cells and get into the center of the cell to nourish the cell in places that it's malnourished, and to pull the toxins out of the cell and bring them into the bowel, which is why it was so important, if we go back to the beginning of our talk, why it's so important that our bowels are living, and that our kidneys and liver is working, and then our lymphatic system. So this whole program of working with a special group of supplements has to do with how do we upregulate the whole basic system of the body for drainage, which we identified. And then from there, then our drainage system can support us in detoxification of harmful substances out of our body without making us sick in the process. And then we talked about Dr. Tom Cowan's book, which will take us into all of that. So homeopathic remedies are frequencies of information that we're giving to higher energy systems of our body so that it can work at a higher level down into the physical to heal us. And my hit on it, by the way, I don't know any homeopaths who describe it that way. My other hit about it is that we have unique needs for our autonomic nervous system to be brought into the bigger picture. And a homeopathic remedy is actually speaking the language of the autonomic nervous system. It's making a request. And literally millions of things that are going on in our body in any given second are under the control of the autonomic nervous system. And what we're doing when we give the body a homeopathic remedy is we're giving the body a frequency of a substance that causes the problem that we now have. And that homeopathic remedy has been diluted. So when we give the body that diluted frequency of the thing that causes the problem, the request of the autonomic nervous system is to dilute the symptoms that the original substance causes. So I use a really simple thing to talk about it with people. If you cut an onion, or if 1,000 people cut an onion, 1,000 out of 1,000 people will have some degree of discomfort in their eyes. They'll be burning and stinging. 500 to 999 people will also have a watery, runny nose when they cut that onion. And 250 of those 1,000 people out of 500 will sneeze. Well, we know about, if you live in Austin for any amount of time, cedar fever. And I have people walk into my office and their eyes are burning and they have Kleenex stuffed up their nose because their nose is watering so much, and they're sneezing. And I typically say, just sit down for a minute and I'll go grab homeopathic onion. And I'll put a few pellets on their tongue, and typically within 5 minutes they have no symptoms left. Because even though cedar is not an onion, it has the symptoms of onion. So in homeopathy we talk about similimums. When we find something that's similar to what causes the problem in nature, and we give a frequency of it so that it can speak to the autonomic nervous system, the autonomic nervous system finds the answer for us. And the autonomic nervous system has the capacity to utilize the most amazing pharmacy that's greater than any pharmacy on earth, and it exists within our own body.
Mm-hmm.
And our body finds its own unique answer, and it heals us.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, we're not putting something into our body, even like an herb, that if we're too cold pushes us hot, or if we're too hot pushes us cold. We're not taking something that we might need to take for the rest of our lives because we're just basically laying something on top of a problem that's changing a symptom, but we're actually getting underneath, we're actually going to the curative level that our body is finding the answer for us. Because the autonomic nervous system's job is to keep us alive and to do whatever it can to help us. Okay? So that's a quick little idea about the homeopathy, and I just want you to know that there are amazing homeopaths who are constantly kind of exploring newer and newer worlds of how can we treat the crazy problems that we now have because of the toxicities that we have. Like for instance, after the bomb was dropped in Hiroshima, the first plants to grow became a homeopathic remedy that we've used when people have experienced severe trauma, torture, because that's what we did to the earth, we tortured her. There's, as crazy as it might sound, there's a homeopathic remedy that's made from the Berlin Wall, which had to do with separation. And the frequency of the Berlin Wall has helped so many people who have been isolated and prevented from their freedoms, which caused severe traumatic experience for them. So, I mean, there's just these wild homeopathic remedies that are now being tested in very unique ways and have made enormous inroads into the healing for people that have never been able to be healed before. Yes, yes.
And in terms of your offering and what you do, this is one of the ways you treat people is through this, and then you kind of are learned in all the latest
Yeah,
other
I'm constantly
continent
studying, honey.
level. Okay.
Yeah, I probably spend a minimum of 2 hours a day studying. When Bernard got here, you know, all the time that I'm working in the kitchen, cleaning, sweeping, whatever, I'm listening. When he got here, the sound was blaring of another class, which was about homeopathy and COVID. So, yeah. Yes, Bernard?
30 minutes left.
30 minutes left, okay. So much, so much, so much. Okay, so I want to tell you that there are a lot more ways to treat than most of us have heard about in even all the newest YouTubes and, you know, doctors from all around the world. So I'm going to share with you some of them that for me have been really effective. And also some that are new for me that I really am interested in exploring in greater depth. And I'm experimenting on myself and inviting my patients to experiment at this level, and you're welcome to if you want to too. So there's a really interesting professor out of UT San Antonio who for 50 years has been researching melatonin. High-dose melatonin, really high-dose melatonin, shockingly high-dose melatonin. Yes, yes. And I have been listening to lots of doctors who have studied his work, and they have their own hits on it. And somehow through the grace of God, I one day said, I have to talk with him because there's such differing information about how to treat. And so I started the process of calling UT and trying to find phone numbers, and I was on the phone for like an hour, and eventually I was given the phone number to his office. I was amazed, and I thought, well, I'd be really lucky if I can speak to one of the PhD students that he's, you know, mentoring, and picking up the phone, or a secretary or something. He picked up the phone himself. It was amazing. He's the sweetest, most humble, gentle, amazing man. He's almost 90 years old. Mm-hmm. He teaches all over the world. He is physically out there still teaching at this age. He is active, and for the last 30 years he's been taking high-dose melatonin. Well, high dose, yes. Okay.
What do you consider
But
high
his-
dose?
30 years.
How many milligrams?
Yeah.
30 years.
Both.
Oh, high dose, 30 years he's been taking.
How many milligrams is high dose?
Okay, he has a way of knowing how many you should take. So it has to do with 1 milligram per kilogram of body weight.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we're more than 40, we should add some more for good measure. Okay? Now, another doctor that many of the alternative medical doctors have studied working with ozone with, he's Dr. Ozone, Dr. Schallenberger. I don't know if you've heard his name, but all the alternative docs know about Dr. Schallenberger. He did a talk after he spent time at a class with, his name is, by the way, Dr. Russell Ritter, who is the researcher. There's literally hundreds of published papers in medical journals on his research in melatonin, and a lot on cancer.
How often does he say you have to take that?
Before you go to bed, if you're not sick. If you have cancer, you're going to be taking it 4 times a day. So here's what he found. He found with mice to start out with that were injected, their mother was injected, and they had verified that they had a very aggressive form of breast cancer. That these mice with 4th stage cancer, metastatic cancer, basically had no more growth development of the cancer as long as they were in the dark. And then he found that they could be in the light as long as they took melatonin all day long, which created the situation that happens when you're in the dark, which is that your melatonin can function in the body. And one drop of light, and this goes way back to some research that I read like 30 some odd years ago in a book called Lights Out by T.S. Wiley. They showed that just putting a pinpoint of light on your skin in a completely black room would stop your melatonin function.
Wow.
So we have to sleep, for instance, going back to sleep in a completely dark room,
That's
otherwise
right.
the melatonin is not.
That's right.
Oh my gosh.
I've heard that.
Oh my God.
So I have YouTubes on sleep habits and what we need to do in order to support our health.
What is your YouTube channel?
It's basically, go to my website, awakeninghealth.com, and you'll find something that you can click on. There, it's a little purple, and it says blogs and media. And then once you're in there, click on the media section, and there's a whole list of my YouTubes there. And gosh, I'll grab a book too that we can note at the end of the talk that is written by someone that I think has the most extensive view of what we can do to support ourselves with our sleep to be healthy. And one of the things that he recommends is to go outside in the morning sun and catch your sunrise time. Jack, I'm forgetting his last name right now, a neurosurgeon, has done thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of research on speaking about the importance of the frequencies of light that are only available during sunrise and sunset, but especially during sunrise, the first 2 hours. And basically that, if you get out in the sun for at least a half an hour during the first 2 hours of the sunrise, you'll be supporting yourself in the capacity to produce melatonin at night.
I noticed a huge difference when I started sun gazing in the morning. The first, because you can actually look directly at the sun during
But you
the
have
first
to do it
30
slowly.
minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to start very slowly and build up. So you need to really make sure you know what you're doing if you're going to do sun gazing. Sunrise and sunset are the safest times to do it.
The only times I would even consider doing. But what's interesting is that I don't know if anyone's noticed, but the last year living here in Austin it's been almost impossible to do because there's been some really weird hazy stuff all over. Everyone can't even see this.
But you're still getting the frequencies, honey, even if you can't see it.
The haze around Austin is definitely.
So there's...
Well, that's if you're outside, yeah, obviously. But I'm talking like the sun gazing.
Right.
Actually, it's
Right.
a lot more potent.
You're still getting the frequencies. And that's more important than the physical seeing of it. Ah, great. Yes. Yes. So the book is called Sleep Smarter.
Do you want it?
And thank you. And it's by Sean Stevenson. In my YouTube, I include a bunch of things that he hasn't included in here. But he actually included some things in here that I hadn't known about, which was wonderful to see. I think because sleep is so important, remember in our very beginning discussion we talked about how the third most important thing for life is sleep. How torture happens by preventing people from sleeping. That we can lose our minds and our capacity to function as a human being if we don't get to sleep.
Mm-hmm. Been there.
Have you heard about Why We Sleep from, what's his name? Matthew Walker?
No, I haven't.
It's amazing too. I highly recommend it.
Matthew Walker.
Yeah, Why We Sleep.
Okay, so I will look at that. She's talking about Matthew Walker and Why We Sleep.
That's the name of the book.
That's his book. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we sleep because we have a great need, from my personal experience,
Oh, absolutely.
to travel into other dimensions and to release and to work things out that need to be worked out on the unconscious and subconscious levels. That would be my first hit on why we sleep. And to rebuild and to re-nourish and to be able to go into the parasympathetic state, that polyvagal state that we were talking about, to heal ourselves, because that is the natural polyvagal state, is when we sleep. That's one of the reasons why it's so important to not have a cell phone in your bedroom when you're sleeping, to turn off all the electricity if you possibly can. In Europe, they literally have like a little clicker that you click to turn off the electricity in your bedroom. You want to unplug as much as you can, and if you have a circuit breaker where you can turn off the circuit to your bedroom, you want to do that. And you want to move your bed away from the wall so that the electrical lines in the wall aren't getting you. I spent a couple of years backpacking in the woods, and when I came out of the woods, I couldn't, this is in the 70s, before cell phones or anything like that. I could not sleep in the house. I was jangly. For almost a year, I slept outside.
Oh, wow.
And I saw how our way of living numbs us down to so much of what's potential for us. And there's a fabulous book that I brought out. I think that, you know, for any of us who are interested in what we can do to make a bigger difference and to understand the importance of living in, at least for a certain amount of hours, free of electricity a day, if it's humanly possible, which to me means getting out and bathing in nature. Having a symbiotic relationship with the trees, walking and breathing out my CO2 and receiving the gift of the trees and the oxygen, and letting my whole body be bathed in the gifts of the trees that are beyond the oxygen and the subtle energies of the earth and all of the fungus and the planet that's, you know, providing unbelievable nourishment to us, like mushrooms on the earth. There's a fantastic YouTube outright, or not YouTube, a movie called Fantastic Fungus. I highly recommend that you take a look at. It's one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen. And it talks about the fungus layer underneath the earth and what it's doing for us, the network and communication. I mean, it's another one of the many things that's showing how connected we all are, how everything's connected to everything. But in the invisible rainbow, this is a doctor who's also a medical historian, who's also electrically sensitive. And he's literally taking us through the history of electricity and the degradation of our health. Mm-hmm. And as the electricity became stronger and stronger in our world, so did diseases.
There's another book also that talks about that. It's a lot thinner. It's called Dirty Electricity.
Dirty Electricity.
Yeah, and it talks about that too. When there's like this shift, any kind of new technology that comes in terms of electricity, or you know, now the 5G, there's some kind of pandemic. Like a lot of people get sick.
So that's
what
that's
talks
in
about.
here.
That talks about that too.
Yeah.
But it's this. One of the reasons why this is so big is about a third of this is medical citations. Every line practically that's in here is verified by either medical studies or newspaper articles or magazine articles. I mean, I cannot believe how much work went into this book. But I tell people, if you're going to read this and you don't feel like you can read the whole thing, start out with the last 3 to 5 chapters, and it'll show you what's going on now. And that could give you the desire to read from the beginning the whole history, because it's fascinating. It really, really is. So you'll see how in the beginning, when before we had electricity, there were so little heart attacks and so little diabetes that doctors could go their whole lives and never see a heart attack or diabetes. And as electricity started to become a bigger and bigger part of our lives, it was in the walls, it was, you know, whatever, as that happened, so did heart attacks grow, and so did diabetes grow, and all kinds of neurological diseases that we never saw on the planet before. And there's all kinds of charts that have been done by statisticians showing how where the electricity was and the numbers of, you know, amounts of electricity correlated exactly with the growth of these different diseases. It's just mind-boggling. So, I mean, this is, for somebody that wants some science, boy, this is it. It's pretty hard to refute this. Okay? So, I mean, a lot of us need this because we're so addicted to technology. And, you know, the more we can do, we're not going to get away from it. There's no way we're going to get away from it. But the more we can understand what we're doing so that we at least give ourselves holidays. But for God's sakes, you don't, you know, if you're a man, wear a cell phone in your pocket by your testicles. Or a woman, put a cell phone in your bra, for God's sakes.
I know, it's like,
Right.
And what are we doing putting a cell phone at our head?
I know.
I mean, as we started doing that, we started seeing glioblastomas going crazy. We never saw them before.
honestly, if I put the phone on my ear, I can feel pain.
Oh, me too. I can't
Physical
do
pain.
it.
I do that.
I have so many protectors on my cell phone. I literally have protectors for a whole car on my cell phone because my hands are so sensitive.
Oh, I know. It like burns.
Yeah, yeah. So if I have a car protector on my cell phone, I can get away with holding a cell phone.
Before we run out of time, can you speak a little bit about the mitochondria? Oh my goodness.
I have 10 minutes. Okay, so I'll put this, mitochondria are so important because they are responsible for energy. And for anything to work in our body, for our immune system to work, for us to be alive, for anything, it's not just us, for anything to live on this planet, they need mitochondria. Mitochondria started in the ocean. They're bacteria. And they became part of us from the very beginning of life on this planet. They're in every plant, they're in every insect, they're in everything that's alive.
Every living thing.
Anything that needs energy. Right?
Yeah.
Mitochondria are part of it. And this part was so amazing to me. There are parts of our brain, gosh, the name is escaping me right now, the something cingulate, that has like 100 million mitochondria per cell.
Wow.
That's true also of our ovum. Most of our body parts have hundreds per cell, like in our muscles and things like that. Our brain and some of our organs when we're younger will have like 1,000 per cell. Our brains need twice as much oxygen, by the way, as any other part of the body because that's where we have the highest amount of mitochondria. Okay? So mitochondria make ATP, and there's this huge dispute right now whether whether ATP is actually energy or that which is essential for what we call the electron chain electron transport chain to produce energy. We're thinking now that it's more that the ATP provides what we need for the electron transport chain, and that the ATP itself is not the similimum or the similar of, or the word energy. They used to use it as a definition. The ATP was a definition of energy in the body. It looks like the electron transport chain is, but ATP is essential for the electron transport chain to move and to create energy for us. So we're getting away more and more from the idea of form into space and movement of energy and flow is what actually makes things happen, not form, not the form of the ATP. But it's what the ATP does, how it creates movement of the electron transport chain. But the bottom line is the capacity for energy, the ability to produce energy has to do with our mitochondria. And the work that I encourage you to look up that's in other YouTubes, because I'm not going to have time to get into it with you today, but we can do this again, is the work that I'm doing with a company called CellCore. It's a father and son who are the two primary scientists behind the product line. They didn't start the company. They were hired by the company to make these amazing substances. And the father of this duo, father and son, he was basically had a hit out for his life for many years by Monsanto. He's what we call a carbon technology biochemist. And his work has been understanding carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, which is the foundation of life. And he saw how glyphosate basically stops our mitochondria from working. It prevents it from completing its process. And he found ways to work to restore that energy back after it had damaged. And he started out by putting his focus on going around the world to different countries to do his best to get them to not allow glyphosate into their farming industry.
What is this person's name?
I just remember his first name is Jeff.
Yeah.
But he's our scientist in CellCore.
CellCore, is that
Yes.
cellcore.com or something?
Yes, cellcore.com.
Are the products in development, or are you able to buy
Oh, no,
these?
no, no, they've been
nutrients
happening
that-
for a long time now, and all of us who've been doing the work with CellCore, none of, yeah, it's the foundation of the physical stuff I do with people. None of us have gotten the COVID, none of us who have been doing this.
Is it a supplement?
It's more than a supplement. It's a whole protocol that has to do with drainage first, detoxification, removal of parasites, and then infections.
So it's like a whole
And
program.
it's phases, and you don't go to the next phase until you have the first phase, unless you're working with someone like me who can muscle test you and also look at other types of testing and make sure that when we, like if somebody's really suffering from Lyme disease, I can give you tiny amounts of the medication that we typically wouldn't, or not medication, but the supplementation that we would give you maybe by the 5th phase. We can give you small amounts just to help to keep the symptoms under control while we're preparing your body to actually clear it.
So you can actually get rid of Lyme disease.
Yeah.
So many people suffer with.
You're still going to see it, you know, in an IgE test, but you won't have symptoms. And the bottom line is that we can live with all these things.
Yes.
And we have all these things as part of us.
I'm living proof. I'm living proof.
Yes, good.
Because
You had Lyme disease?
I say that I did. I mean,
Don't have it
I
anymore.
diagnosed myself.
Okay.
But I did a herbal protocol to get rid of it. Detoxification.
Dr.
Stephen Porges.
Okay. So we have herbs also, and the doctor who developed the herbs for this work, we include those in what we're doing with the different processes that we talked about earlier. And he's literally probably worked with over 30,000 people that he has helped to be symptom-free from Lyme disease and not need to continue to take anything to be functioning at an incredibly high level. So he's contributed his herbs for Babesia and Bartonella and Borrelia and other co-infections. And the interesting thing is that the herbal tinctures that he's put together for those things seem to get rid of all kinds of different infections, not just those things.
Oh, yeah.
Do people have, like the Lyme disease, people that are detoxing, do they suffer detox symptoms and have a hard time, you know, during the whole protocol?
There can be that. Now, the thing
Everybody's
that makes,
different.
yeah, everybody's different. The thing that makes my work kind of unique compared to everybody else that I know of at this point, and maybe there's people who are doing this, but I will make homeopathic remedies of the supplements that you're having detox reactions to so that you can actually take them. Typically what we had to do was reduce the amounts to the tiniest thing so that you might take a year to be able to get to an effective dose.